Have you ever felt overwhelmingly stuck? We hit these walls, we don't know what to do, and the world around us seems to shrink, the pressure seems to build, and the more we fight, the less we move. But how do you get unstuck? How do you go from the frustration, the walls closing in, and break out of the cycle? In today's episode, we're going to help you get unstuck as fast as possible, whether that's stuck in business, stuck in your personal life, stuck in your relationships, or stuck with your money. We're going to start this conversation with a dramatic look at what it feels like to be stuck. And if you've heard this story before, then you might find it interesting how our version of being unstuck might just get you where you want to go faster. Today, we're going to talk about Aron Ralston. Aron Ralston was a mountaineer, and in 2003 went for a hike in Blue John Canyon, which is in Utah. So not very far from here in Arizona. It can't be that far from Zion National Park. We had a retreat in Zion that was really, really successful. And while he was hiking, let's start this actually beforehand. When he went to go hiking, this is like entrepreneurship 101. He went for this long hike and told nobody that he was going.
That's right.
Classic, right, Marty?
Yeah.
Didn't tell anybody he was going. And on the hike, went up, successful. On his way back down, an 800-pound boulder dislodged and pinned his right arm to the rock. This story ended up becoming a like national best-selling story that you can read about, you can watch about it. It's got all kinds of press. But in this moment where this boulder pins him to the rock, he can't move. He's stuck. And for 5 days, he sits there and deals with being stuck. Now, sometimes stuck in business feels way longer than 5 days, and usually it is. But imagine going for a hike and being stuck wherever you were on the hike for 5 days. Those 5 days probably felt like 5 years. And over 5 days, he grapples with dehydration. He had very sparing food and water with him. He also had a multi-tool, like one of those Gerber, has a knife the size of like your pinky finger, has a screwdriver, has like something if you need to like scratch your like your back, like not very functional, and is now sitting there dealing with highs and lows in temperatures, all kinds of different mental thoughts, and even gets to the point where day after day after day, he knows something bad is happening. Like, talk about being stuck. His mindset is just unraveling in front of him. By day 6, in his state of hallucination, you got to imagine, again, it probably felt like 5 years. If you've been stuck in business for a year, 2 years, I get it. This guy probably felt the same way. Day 6, in his hallucination, decides to snap his forearms very methodically, I will add, snap both of his bones in his forearm and cut through his arm with the multi-tool, which again has a blade like two maybe 3 inches big. Like it's a tiny fucking blade, and he is sawing off his arm. And eventually he gets to the most excruciating part of this sawing, which was severing the major nerve that flows down your forearm. He said later in an interview that it was the most excruciating pain. But that wasn't the end of it. So he's been stuck there for 5 days, no help. He recorded messages on his phone saying goodbye to his loved ones. He ended up carving his name in the rock with an expected date of death because he was on his way out, almost given up completely, saws his arm off, and still has to get down the mountain. To get unstuck, he couldn't just cut his arm off. That wasn't enough. He then had to rappel down a 65-foot cliff with one hand and walk about 6 miles until he found a family that was on a hike. Like, imagine that family's discovery. And they eventually called a helicopter and he was flown out. At that point, there's still so much work to do, right? He's now in the hospital, has to have his arm sewed back together, and begin the healing process from all this. And now, long since recovered, there's a great book on this called Between a Rock and a Hard Place. Great title. And like still today, mountaineers, 14,000 foot mountains all across the world, solo by himself. Hopefully he learned not to not tell anybody. But this story is a great reminder of what being stuck feels like, pinned between an 800-pound boulder, and what it looks like to get out of being unstuck. And today we're going to talk about how to do it, where to start, and in particular, what you can do today to take an action step towards a new positive direction. Marty, this is a really cool story for like us to look at, but actually I want to start with, just what you think happened during those 5 days, because on paper it's like, oh, it's only 5 days, but that is one excruciating pain. It's also, you're trapped in the middle of nowhere by yourself in your head with this kind of pain. That's really what being stuck feels like.
So I'm like cringing on the inside because I saw the movie. The movie is 127 hours. James Franco plays him in the movie. And then I proceeded to watch several interviews about him and his story after I saw the movie. But I'm like cringing on the inside because I can still see him doing what, I mean, obviously they don't show you everything in the movie as he's cutting his arm off. But what you can see in the movie is the physical pain that he's experiencing in that moment. And so it's definitely worth watching the movie. You said there's a book as well about it. All those things are probably good. But the movie is worth watching. Just to you could really feel into his experience of being stuck in that spot and the pain associated with it, and obviously immense loneliness because no one even knew that he was there.
Yeah, the thing that I empathize with is actually not the cutting of the arm. It's the carving of the name and death date on the rock. Because what this story depicts is one in probably 100 where someone didn't give up. And I think for most of us, we do. And there would be no shame in that. You are pushed to the brink of exhaustion. You are in incredible amounts of pain and you can't move. And until, I'm sure that idea did not hit him until the moment there was nothing else. But
yeah, I don't remember the sequence of events, whether that happens. Does that happen before he cuts his arm off? I don't remember necessarily. But I would think carving his name in the rock, the name and the date in the rock, was also a point of surrender for him. Like,
yeah,
like this is it. Like how you eventually have to get to that point where you just surrender, which ironically will help you actually see yourself through the stuckness.
Yeah, it's part of the action step that we can talk about today. The 5 days in a situation like that, where you have presumed yourself dead, does something to you, right? It whether it's a day like that, like, I mean, people struggle with like a silent meditation retreat, let alone a silent meditation retreat in the middle of the mountains with an 800-pound boulder pinning your right arm down. Like that's basically what it is.
Right.
And, your screams are futile. Your pleas for help, your talks to God, like they don't matter in that moment. And I think when we hit this moment of being stuck, and I have been stuck many times in very many ways, emotional, relational, financial, business, entrepreneurial, like when you're in the position of being stuck, what fades the fastest is hope. And when you're 5 days in, you are probably broken of hope. I mean, I don't know for sure, but there's surely a testament of letting go of all hope at that point.
Yeah, or is it worth fighting it? The one thing I thought of while you were telling the story, though, was stuckness is eventually is in some ways just a resistance to something changing, right? That's all it essentially is. I'm trying to fight to stay where I'm at when I'm being pulled in another direction, and so it creates the stuckness between those two worlds, and the resistance to stay often just seems to overpower the momentum to move, to change.
I love that. The resistance to change. Change is one of those obstacles that most entrepreneurs deeply want. It's sort of the ironic part of it is that we all want change. The thing is, we want to control how we get the change, like how it happens. And in this case, right, it's this is a very linear and simplified example. The change is I want to have my arm free, right? I want to go home, I want to get help, etc.
He didn't just want his arm free. He wanted to be free to get
Yeah,
out
I
of it.
want out, like get me out of here. And ironically, he gets his freedom, right? The question though is like, well, how do I get it? And I think if you're in a position like his, again, it's an oversimplification of what many people experience as far as stuckness, but you have a limited array of options that actually gets you free. You just don't want to consider them. And it makes sense in this situation, right? That's a drastic example. But if we're in business or we're pursuing something meaningfully, personally, there are usually more options than cutting your arm off.
But it was still an option.
Still an
right?
option.
It was either that or nothing's ever going to change. I'm just going to die. Where you just kind of give up at that point. So he had the option.
It's not a desirable option.
Right. Do I want to? Is that enough to set me free to become to move forward?
To move forward, yeah. What I find psychologically fascinating is the turning point between an undesirable option and a feasible option. Right? Because at a certain point, you're stuck for long enough, 5 days out in the middle of the mountain. You're going through nights, ups, downs. Like this story, like most people that have had like maybe a bad camping trip can understand like, oh man, like you're out in the woods.
My tent got wet.
This guy's pinned on a rock.
Right.
Like there's no camping. There's no like fire. There's no sleeping bag. Like he is pinned against a rock and can't move.
Yeah.
Not is your arm busted, but like you are stuck.
He also had the extremes of that environment where it's hot during the day, similar to here, and then it gets cold at night.
Yeah. Again, the telling of the story sort of oversimplifies the actual experience. Like those hours and days, I'm sure were excruciating. But at some point, an undesirable option becomes a feasible option where you've exhausted all of the desirable options feasible. And you start crossing and like, you could call this rock bottom, right? Rock bottom is a choice, in my opinion, where you're just like, this is enough. Like I'm willing to now confront the undesirable options and consider them. Because if you just keep in the like fun, frou-frou, happy-go-lucky options, you're probably not going to get unstuck. And at a certain point, the pain of being stuck gets so high that all of a sudden an option that seemed undesirable starts to look very feasible.
Well, his only other option really was to scream, hoping someone would hear him. There weren't many options for him.
Not at all. Not at all. And none of that, whether your list of options in whatever stuckness you're experiencing, whether your list of options is 4,000 or 4, the list of undesirable options is probably going to be more important because your desirable options are all like, they're fantasy. They're like, well, no, this is the easy way. There's the easy.
And do the undesirable options just simply feed into, again, it's avoiding the change that's kind of where you're being pushed. And we label them undesirable because it's asking something of us in order to move forward.
Yeah. Here, if you're listening, what you can take away from this story is, aside from what we've already talked about, is a really important action step that most entrepreneurs are really afraid to lean in and go full force on. In a moment where we feel stuck, the calculus we try to do is addition. We're like, what can I add to this situation? And in addition, at least this has been my story. In addition, what I'm doing is I'm looking for more to put on my plate, more pressure, more challenge, more. And in this quest to get unstuck, I have failed the first test. And the first test is that addition to an already complicated problem only makes it more complicated.
Yeah, what I'm thinking because I also view it through the lens. There's a grief that's happening at the same time because something is dying. And is this your experience? Because part of the grief process is conditions. If I do this, then I start to create conditions that somehow it will get me there through these conditions. Again, that's the control piece.
And that's the bargaining of grief, right? We all have these bargains of like,
Right.
hey, wait, don't go, or like, but now I'll do this, right? That happens in loss.
Like, what more do you want me to do?
Yeah, and in that loss is an important surrender to the point you made earlier. But if you're looking at the calculation and saying, okay, what more can I do? You're missing the point of this story. The point of this story is that what got this guy, who happens to have a great name, what got Aron unstuck was cutting. It was subtraction. And this is again, it's a very dramatic and oversimplified example of what it really looks like to be stuck. But it's a great corollary for what's going on. It's a great parable for what might be happening for you. And if you keep adding to this situation, you will only make the stuck last longer because you'll have to undo all of the things that you've added to get back to the original equation, which is from where you are, it is time to cut.
Yeah, it only feels more impossible.
It pushes it. And I've done it. Like, I'm just going to keep adding and adding and adding. In business, I'm going to add a new product. I'm going to add a new team member. I'm going to add a new system. I'm going to add. Or you know what? Like, oh, no one's buying. You know what I need to do? I need to add, let's add another discount. Let's add another offer. Let's add another program. Let's add another opinion. Let's add another, week of freebies. Like, dude, no one's buying. Stop.
I learned it from a spiritual director I had years ago, a woman in Ohio, who, because I mean, we've all been in that situation where we're stuck, where we just can't seem to move. But I remember her telling me, it's never going to change until you get out of your head, until you stop trying to figure it out. Again, there's the control piece. You're trying to control the situation and allow yourself to just kind of drop into yourself. Whether you have to drop into your heart, drop into your body, drop into whatever you want to label that as. That you got to get out of your head in order to finally set yourself free.
Get out of your own way, man.
Oh yeah,
that. Yeah, that does fit. When I think about some of the moments I've been stuck the most, what I really don't want to do, what I really avoid is the cost. Like that's the damage that most of us incur, is that I don't want to pay the cost. I don't want to pay the cost. I don't want to pay the cost. And then we just defer the payment plan, and then it comes back 10 times harder. Like, it wouldn't be that long. Like, we don't have to be stuck for months. We just have to make the choice earlier.
You become indebted to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can ask me how I know, but I know. And having had to pay a couple hard tolls in my life. What I go back to in a story like this is like this moment where he talks about the incredible pain, right? He talks about like severing the nerve. And what I think about it, like, this is just like the way my mind thinks.
I can still hear him like screaming in the movie.
I'm sure. I mean, all of that hurts, right? But you get to this nerve and like, you're using a 2-inch blade. It's not like this is a sword where just one slice. This is excruciating pain, and you're doing it to yourself. Like, your mind is not programmed to do that. But severing this nerve is a really interesting sort of macro or micro of something really big. And that's, in that moment, you are cutting off something that is connected to who you are. It's an identity piece, right? I have an arm. Like, this guy had to make a tremendous identity shift to go from like, I'm a 2-armed guy to a 1-armed guy. But that's what the nerve does. The nerve is the way that we sense that arm.
Yeah.
And to sever that, you have to really be letting go of an identity piece of who you are. And in that calamity, I think all of us have to do something like that. I've got to sever a part of me. I've got to let go of a part, like, not I'm just cutting myself free and I'm cutting, an old friend or an old client or an old business model. It's not that. It's I'm cutting off me, a part of me.
Yeah, a lot of times I think it's easier when it's other people or something else because it's beyond us.
Yeah.
It We become so attached to whatever that identity is, thinking that that's like the fullness of who we are. When in
Mm,
reality, it's just that piece. It's just that nerve going down our arm that is that fraction of who we are. But in that moment, it feels like it's the whole. We're losing the whole.
definitely. You know, the comic book nerd in me thinks back to, if any of you are comic book nerds, you'll appreciate this moment. There's a in Avengers, the I think it's in Endgame. I think no, it's in Infinity Saga. The the main villain, Thanos, is standing on top of this big mountain, and his sort of like adopted daughter, Gamora, is standing there with him, and there's like this shade that is telling him that, hey, you have to give up your heart in order to get the stone. And this is, Marvel did a great job of making the villain very complex. But in the moment, Gamora looks at him and says, you have nothing to give up. You have no heart. There is nothing left of you except greed and like bloodthirst. And he, like, you sort of see his shoulders from behind where she is standing. And he turns around and he's got a tear falling down his face. And instantly she knows what's about to happen.
There it is. Yeah.
And so he's got to get rid of her. He throws her over the edge. And the death of her was sort of the death of his heart. The way that the Shade, who's a different character in the overall Marvel saga, he says a soul for a soul. He's fighting for the soul stone, and a soul for a soul. So you got to give up what you care about the most to get this. And it's a really interesting depiction, because I think that for what it means to be stuck, what it looks like on the outside is that you just gave up something you didn't want. And what it feels like on the inside is you gave up what you wanted most, or what you loved most. And having had to make a couple choices, I can actually remember after making a choice like this, sitting in a bar and crying. And like, I wasn't like weeping, but like I was kind of wiping my tear while like a slow drip just happened out of my right eye. And I'm trying to cover it up.
Down into your drink. Like it wasn't that
Right into the
dramatic.
beard, baby. Let's go. And in that moment, what I was crying for was not, it was not that I had to pay this cost. It's that I had to be willing to lose who I once was. Like I was paying the cost. I understood what the cost was. I also understood what the gain was, but that didn't make it any easier, because I had to watch a version of me die, and I had to watch a series of choices and a series of commitments and a series of pains and a series of sacrifices all go away for a version of me that could not get unstuck. And the only way to get unstuck was to let that version of Aron die. And it's a really painful process, but it's important.
And I've heard it put this way, though. You really have to learn to integrate death into who you are, because you're going to experience those small deaths over and over again. You can tell when someone gets to the end of where they're like facing death, the end of their life here, whether death has been integrated into their life, because they will just fight it. And they never allowed death to be a natural part of the cycle of their life. It was always about holding on, then it was about letting go. And so it has to be integrated into who you are, that this is just a natural part of the process of us throughout our lives, that there's a small death happening over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. To connect this to vision, for those of you that are struggling with this letting go, if you can imagine a life that's better, you will also have to imagine a life that's dead. You can't simultaneously keep the life you have and get the life you want. And the real process of that is, in my opinion, a deep honoring of like, hey, this life isn't bad. It's like, where I'm at isn't bad. It's almost part of what gets us stuck. I think what got me stuck, what I've seen get others stuck, what I've helped others get unstuck from, is like, yeah, but this is good. Shouldn't I be grateful? And we get in this mode of like, well, am I not supposed to want more? Like, I mean, come on, I got it pretty good, don't I? And in order to really get unstuck, you will have to admit and honor, like, I do have it good and I want more. It's okay to want more, but you'll have to let good go if you want to pursue great.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be binary. It's also, in my experience, what you think you're letting go of isn't always necessarily what you're letting go of.
Nice.
That there's often, even like that talk of death, it's a death of an image you have of yourself. It's not you that's dying. I mean, you are, obviously, but it's an image that you have had of yourself that's really being let go of. So it's not always, I'm always mindful of that. It's not what you think is dying isn't necessarily what is dying.
It's true. It's true. You know, I think back to like my coaching career, and if I go to just athletics, if I go to athletics, one of the hardest deaths as the team I was creating got better and better and better is that I went from sort of like the Mighty Ducks mentality where I'm like taking ragtag teams and, you know, players that were kicked off of other programs and maybe couldn't find a home. And I'm like building this like unit out of it.
Bad News Bears.
I have no idea what that is.
You're too young, I guess.
Millennial power. I've said that before, but I have no idea what you're referencing. But you know, we like
for all those a little older, they'll know.
They'll know. They'll know. If you have gray hair, you'll know.
Right.
If you're 100 like Marty, you'll know. But we went from this like, I'll take anybody and I'm going to help you build and grow, to like, now we have a pedigree and now I actually have to maintain the standards. I have a responsibility to that. I can also think about my professional coaching career where I still remember the first person I coached, $400 a month for 2 calls a week. So 8 calls a month. And I felt like I was reaching for the stars at that point. And now it would be inappropriate to give away my time like that. And I've had to say no to where that person is at. Right. And some of that's really difficult emotionally to be like, I can't save everybody. And at that point I tried. And as my coaching career grew in this space, what was hardest, Marty, was like, I know now I can't help everybody. And like, there's a certain person that I can help, and I've got to stay true to that. And I think that's part of this business stuckness that happens, is like, you can't help the old clients and help the new clients and stretch and grow. You got to evolve and let things go and say no.
Yeah. What I thought of while you were telling that story was, you're still making a choice in that moment if you continue to help the old clients.
Yes.
And the choice you're making at that point is to settle. Right? I'm
Nice.
settling. I'm making the choice to settle.
Yeah.
That this is as good as it gets. This is as good as I am. This is whatever you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
It's still a choice to do that.
Yeah. And you know what I love about like calling it out like that is that if as a coach I choose to settle, and this is true as a parent, this is true as a friend, this is true in relationships, like it's always true. If you choose to settle, you have to be willing to acknowledge that most of the people that you initially helped are going to go past you.
Correct.
And like you're staying, right? Like you meet someone at, like, you go for a bike ride together and they're like, hey, I'm going to keep riding. And you're just like, you know what? No, I'm going to stay right here. And the breaking point of that is that,
and you better be ready to live with regret.
yes, the breaking point is that you haven't calculated the future opportunity, the opportunity cost of like, hey, yes, you're going to have to leave the old client model behind, or the old business model behind, or the people that may not really want to go with you. You might have to leave some people in the bar before you go on the next bike ride. But if you don't go on the bike ride, you are condemning many of the people who would in the future ask you for help at the next level, at the next stop, at the next station. And, you know, our coaching program has, like, we're now working with some of the best CEOs, larger organizations, individuals that are ready to make an impact, that are successful on paper, but may not have fulfillment. There's a totally different problem set. And there's a part of me that totally misses the days of like much more cavalier conversations and way less structure and way less pressure on calls. And
like when you were coaching me. Is that
we won't speak of those days. There was still pressure even then. I mean, that was still growth from that initial spot. But as part of me still misses those days, what I also know is that by helping leaders, it does have an effect down. That if I keep growing, I, in some ways, show the individuals that I've worked with how to grow and what it looks like to grow. And I think my responsibility as a coach is to help people move. I think your responsibility as a coach, Marty, for those that you coach, is to help people move. That's why we have this business. That's why we have this mission. That's why we're on this podcast right now, is to help people move. And what shit examples would we be if we also don't move, if we don't make the hard cuts to also grow?
Yeah. Yeah. The leader definitely sets the tone, whoever that person is. And you have to be willing. We talked about this on another episode when we talked about A players, that you have to be willing to not only let them grow, but help facilitate a situation that will help them grow as well. Because if you're growing, the whole company has to grow with you. It just has to.
Yeah.
And you'll eventually learn who has to be let go because they don't want to grow or they're trying to hold it back down. But it's still going to be set. The tone is set by the person, the leader of the
Definitely.
group.
We've got a couple companies that have implemented EOS. And in that process, there's change, right? So there's this organizational momentum that happens when everybody buys in and they're like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to learn this. We're going to install it, et cetera. But usually there's, a couple individuals who are like, I don't want to change, right? They're sort of pinned in with that rock. And whether it's the leader or sometimes it's a leader that's like, hey, I don't want structure. I don't want shape. I don't want accountability because now I'm going to be under the microscope, right? Pinned under the rock. Or it's an employee, a C-suite person, a manager that's pinned under the rock. And ultimately what they end up letting go of is random. What they let go of is, the lack of transparency. They let go of some of these things that in order to get to the next level, you've got to cut. You've got to chop that arm off where, you're not accountable. You're not structured. You're not setting targets. You're not benchmarking. You're not reporting. You're not discussing what's going on. You're not structured. And that's, an immediate cut. If someone doesn't want to make the change, they're pinned between the rock. Those are the options. Like, hey, you got to cut the unstructured gypsy version of you, or we have to leave you here.
Yeah, I'm going to just kind of reiterate a point. There is no such thing as stuck. There is always a choice. It's you don't want to make the choice.
Nice.
That's essentially what it is. So
Nice.
We're never stuck. We just aren't. We just don't want to make the choice.
I love that. Man, so here's a question for you, listener, not for you, Marty. If you have said something like I'm stuck, if you have
I've said it many times over.
Me too. If you said I'm stuck, if you said I'm not growing, if you said I've plateaued, if you said I'm bored, if you said I don't know what to do, we sort of mask the same thing with different language. If you said all that, what are you avoiding? What choice are you avoiding? I'm actually willing to bet that you have a better sense of what you're avoiding than we do, right? Because we're speaking sort of
we always know. That's the thing. We always know.
And look, I'll speak to you directly. So again, Marty, not for you. Maybe it lands with you, but I'll speak directly to you wherever you are: car, home, office.
Stuck on the highway.
Backed up in traffic. You are capable of the choice that is in front of you, and the disbelief that you have about the outcome is largely an illusion of what could be, not what is to be, but what could be. And I want you to take some time today in this car, in this ride, in this moment, to think about the cost of not making the choice. Our world wraps around worst case scenario, not best case scenario. And it's probably the reality somewhere in the middle. But if you just for a moment honor that you're taking the worst case scenario and not even considering the best case scenario, you just might find that small glimmer to make the choice today. Now, you probably know what it is that you've got to do. You probably know that you don't want to do it. You probably know that it's going to hurt a little bit. Just like Aron on the mountain had to chop off his arm. At some point, you just have to look yourself in the mirror and say, this is the out. You can dance, you can play, you can pretend, but at some point you'll have to sever something in order to move forward. You will have to dissociate, cut, subtract, move, avoid, eliminate something in order to get there. Now, I'm going to say this to you again. If for a moment you just honor that you have only considered the worst case scenario and not considered the best case scenario, you're missing a major opportunity to be prepared to pay the cost. The cost could be absolutely devastating. I know, because I've paid the cost many times and it has felt devastating. But that's the beginning of the chapter. And the rest of the chapter is how we take something devastating and turn it into something magical. And you deny yourself the opportunity of the magic by also denying the cost. So today might be the day that you make the decision. It doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, but today might be the day that you make the decision. And in some way, shape, or form, you will start getting your best case scenario when you make the choice. It all starts in a choice. And I really hope that you'll believe in yourself. That's what I really hope you'll do.
I'm going to give you a layup. I'll see if you get it. Because there's the whole element of the unknown in all of it. If I'm quote unquote stuck and there's a choice, I just don't want to make the choice. Does it make it easier when I could see what's beyond the choice?
Unfortunately, no. It doesn't matter if you can see step 5, step 10, step 20. It all starts with step 1. And I think that most of what gets people quote unquote stuck is I can't see step 2. There's a fog. I can't see what's after the choice. It's just a choice. And the choice is your step 1. I'm making this change.
But there still has to be a vision of where you're going. You have to know where you're going.
You got to know. Yeah, absolutely. You got to know the long range.
Like if I'm stuck there and I can't yet see that, it makes it hard to make a choice because I don't necessarily know where I'm going yet.
Yeah. There is you may not need the steps, but you do need the target. You do need what's beyond the obstacle.
Right.
I imagine like a giant fence that's stone, and all you got to do sometimes is peek over the fence and think about, if we do let go of this product and focus on only this other opportunity in business, it's possible that we could actually grow and scale. Or, maybe we need to let some B players go, but it's possible that we could have a really great team that's culture aligned, and we're not fighting at every kind of business opportunity that we have. Or hey, I might have to let go of Netflix at night, but look at what that could mean for my life in 4 or 5 years. Maybe I need to get to the gym because I'm going to crash and burn. Like my health is really at risk now. And if you can see, that's where vision is so important. If you can see a little bit of that through the fog, then I think it's much easier to make the choice. The first step is always difficult, but it's always pinned by developing a vision.
You might have to let go of watching episodes of Thomas the Train or something.
Thomas the Train. We don't watch many episodes of Thomas the Train, but man, whew.
Simple exercise. It is more of a meditation thing, I think, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. If you spend a few minutes a day, not on your phone or anything like that, just staring out at the horizon, it helps to focus you out on the bigger. So it's recommended that you focus on the horizon at least a couple minutes a day.
Nice. Yeah, I love that.
To clear your vision.
Yeah, again, the unknown of like, I think this is a great example to go back to. Like, if you're sitting there sawing your arm off, you cannot see anything beyond that, except like as far as steps. But what you can see is like, I get home. Because I'm willing to bet if he was like, all right, I'm going to cut my arm off, no problem. Then I got to walk 6 miles.
Right.
Then I got to rappel. You're like,
right.
I'll just let it go. Fuck that. But
I'm looking for the tool bag. There's got to be one of those tools around here somewhere.
Yeah, one of those multi-tools. Yeah. I do have one of those. And in a way, the thing that I get most excited about is helping someone see past the choice, right? That's our work, vision.
Correct.
If you can see past the choice, It does not make the choice easier, right? Let's not be disillusioned. But now we can start to make the necessary cuts, and we can start to look at like all these behaviors and patterns and obstacles and really difficult things that you got to pay for. You got to pay your way out of. One that comes to mind recently, I was having breakfast.
I mean, you're there because of the choices you made up to this point anyway.
Yeah, like you got you here.
Right.
I was having breakfast with a client, and he was like, we spent probably 2 months digging him out of day-to-day operations and all this. And we started to talk about how his week would look if he was just a visionary leader. His responsibilities were to meet with key players. We did an episode on this, right? The 4 meeting types: meeting with key players, thinking time, networking time, and self-care. And we were talking about like what his schedule will look like if that's what he did every day. And he was like, well, but what if my team needs help? And this was his arm, right? This was his arm pinned between the rock, because he built his whole world on like, help your team. This is what it means to be a good leader. Just like help your team, help your team, help your team. And what he did not realize in the moment is that he was pinning himself against the rock over and over and over, to the point where he wasn't doing his job.
Right. It creates, which we're really good at, it creates a codependency rather than an interdependence, as we've talked about before.
Yep.
That they need me to help them, and which isn't true at all.
It's not true. And for the individual that's typically the leader, the whole objective of that is, I want to feel needed.
Correct.
It feels great to be needed. And we got to have a long conversation about what needs to be cut. Well, you're not going to be needed. Actually, you might feel the opposite. They might resist. They might not be very happy with the new version of you. They might not like that. Not only do you not have time, the kind of time for them, but you now have a person that they are responsible and reporting to. If they want help, their job is to figure it out now. It's change.
And whether they know it or not, that's actually who they need.
And
they
way
need
better.
That person can be higher, kind of overlooking the whole thing.
The business will stagnate if you are constantly helping.
Yeah. I've had those people. That's why I'm laughing. I've had employees like that.
Yeah. So we had a long conversation about like the cutting effect of that. And I don't know. I think that, well, let me not say I don't know. I know that it's difficult to shift from I'm loved and revered into I'm leading. That is a very difficult transition. I'm loved and revered. I'm respected. I'm, all these things, and I'm the leader. I was at a conference one time. I can't remember when this was, but the speaker, I ended up going to talk to him afterwards and had a couple one-on-one conversations with him. This was probably 15 or 20 years ago. Like I was 21 years old, I think. And he asked a question to the group. He said, would you prefer to be liked, respected, or taken seriously? And man, the room was abuzz with different answers. And he asked people to share their thought and then provide, the details as to why they picked that. So if people said, I want to be liked because if my team likes me, they have a tendency to work harder. Then someone would say, well, I want to be respected because if I'm respected, when I present an idea or I assign a task or a marching order, the team will adopt it and they'll go from there. I want to be taken seriously because, I'm in charge, right? And we went around the room and it was probably 200-300 people in the room. And he said, there's only one right answer. He said, the only option of those 3 is to be taken seriously. It does not matter if you're liked. It does not matter if you're respected. What matters is that you're taken seriously, because if you're taken seriously, they will do the thing as a leader. If they're not respecting you, that's okay, as long as they take you serious. If you're not liked, as long as they take you serious, you'll be all right. But sometimes as a leader, I think we get fixated on being liked and respected so much. Our ego needs to fuel. We refuse to make the hard choices, pay the hard cuts, and make the kind of change that gets the business unstuck, gets the enterprise unstuck, gets the relationship unstuck, because instead of being taken serious, we want rainbows and butterflies.
that's only been fueled by social media as well. What I'm thinking is there's a big difference between them liking you and you caring about them. Like I was always mindful of caring about them and who they are and what they're going through and so on and so on and so on. It had nothing to do with being like. I think you get a lot more out of people if they know that you care about them.
Nice. Which requires you to be taken seriously.
Correct.
Right? That when you say something about caring, they take that serious too.
Yep.
There's a lot of ways to just do lip service to that without actually emoting that you do care or demonstrating it or showing it. And to just kind of anchor this back in our overall point about being stuck. If you cut being liked, if you cut being respected, you might find that the organization can then grow because you are not distracted by the actions and activities that keep you liked and respected. And you're instead focused on what's going to grow this thing.
Otherwise, they're only doing what pleases you and not necessarily what's best for the business.
People pleasing 101.
Yep.
The willingness to sever your arm, the willingness to hit the nerve and deal with the pain is an incredible part of what makes organizations thrive. That's not to say go looking for the pain, but if you're at the junction of choice and you've found yourself dancing between the inevitable choice and the delay of it, you kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, like maybe, I'll make a different choice. And you know it's coming. This is your invitation to think about the cut. What boulder is pinning you does not matter. What your arm experiencing does not matter. The amount of pain you're in does not matter. I recognize it and I sympathize and I empathize with the conditions that you're in. But if you are at the junction of choice, it is time to look solely at what you've got to cut so that you can move forward rather than pretending that everything else in the situation is more important than the cut. It's just time to go.
It's just a choice.
It's just a choice. Words from the wise. You're not stuck. You're just avoiding a choice.
And I get that.
Me too. Yeah, me too. Me too. Here's a way that we can help you. If you're stuck in this moment of choice and in this opportunity to make a change and you genuinely don't know how you'll get through it, we are here to help facilitate that so that you are not alone. We work with a lot of clients who know they need to make a choice, and it takes us a little bit of time to figure out what that choice is, and then we guide them and steer them through it. It's not necessarily comfortable, but it's really powerful to have someone side by side with you in the dark. It's convenient as hell to be a coach when everything's going awesome. You will find very few coaches who stand with you in the middle of your shitstorm and help you navigate through it. That's what you want. That's what you're investing in when you come to us. If you are already making the choice or you've made the choice, but you're not sure how to navigate the storm, call us. Let's set up a time to talk. We can tell you all about what we're doing. But if you are not sure of what it looks like after the choice, if you don't have clarity in what the upside of your choice is, if you're not really sure of what your vision is beyond this, I urge you to get started with us. We can send you some of our exercises, but don't wait any longer, because the longer you stand under this boulder, the longer you let this thing pin you, the lower your odds of survival are. And I have watched companies, teams, leaders, families, friends wither away, holding out for some other option that's less inconvenient. So it's time to make a dramatic choice. We are here to help you build that vision so that you can make the hard choice, and then we will be there with you to stand in it when it is time to make the decision. Just don't wait too long. There is such a thing as waiting too long. Marty, have you experienced that?
Well, you essentially make yourself indebted to something that's already dead. That's all you're doing. It's already dead. It already died.
Yeah, you missed a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've missed a chance a couple times, actually. That's a good reminder. Yeah, if you wait too long, you'll die. And then you just live as a hungry ghost
Yep.
in the shadow of this choice that you never made.
Yep.
We've got lots of ways to help, and we're here with you, whether you ever enroll in a program with us or not. Again, you can reach out to us. We'll be happy to help. If this episode or anything that we've talked about recently, from A players to having an integrator to leadership tactics, is helpful, then keep on listening, keep on going, but know that we're just a phone call, a DM, a message, a website, calendar link away from really being able to stand in for you. This is your reminder to get out of your own way today. It's your reminder that stuck is just a choice. And it's a reminder, most of all, that the story doesn't end at whatever choice you're running from. That's where the story can really begin. And I hope you make the choice so that that next chapter can start. Have a great day. Marty, great job today. And we will see you on the next episode. See you guys.